Now, what do you mean by the interview started as soon as you landed? Was the driver a part of Chick-fil-A and listening in?
He was, but he's made to maybe ask certain questions.
So he's profiling you the whole time.
He's basically in the manner of saying, what type of person are you? Somebody who went all the way through the process, they were going to offer a store to. He didn't wash his hands in the bathroom.
Do not shake that guy's hand.
He probably was like that. I mean,
Dad always told us being a man is not doing what you want to do, it's doing what you don't want to do.
it is. That, if you don't do what I say in the military, you're going in the brig. If you don't do what I tell you at Chick-fil-A, well, I'll
Gets
just
locked
quit.
in the freezer.
To give you statistics, just got back from home office. It's technically easier to get in the CIA and the FBI than it is to get and become a Chick-fil-A owner. That's the statistics right now. It's tough.
Today's sponsor is America First Advertising. Looking to boost your business's visibility? Meet America First Advertising, your go-to solution for digital signage and space. With networks spanning from Baton Rouge to Mississippi, they offer 25 screens in each network. Those locations in high-traffic venues like Walmart, Subway, doctor's offices, restaurants, and gyms. So you can imagine your ad being seen over 1,350 times in a single week. Ready to start your advertising? You can visit americafirstadvertising.com or you can give them a call at 985-615-2680. America Advertising, where your business comes first. I would definitely recommend using these guys. Their screens are literally all over. I can't go anywhere without seeing a screen. So it's highly likely if you're sitting at a restaurant for 30 minutes to an hour, you're gonna see your ad. If you're interested, americafirstadvertising.com or you can give them a call at 985-615-2680.
In figuring out how the process works, it was still a very tough process even back then. It's even tougher now. To give you statistics, just got back from home office, and they told the employees we brought with us to see home office, it's technically easier to get in the CIA and the FBI than it is to get and become a Chick-fil-A owner. That's the statistics right now. It's tough because it's the popularity of it now, the brand, and the power of the brand. But when I did it, it was still very, 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 very tough, and it was new. So I got in on the ground level, which was good. And when they came down to interview, before they came down, I wanted to have some other type of experience other than Procter & Gamble. So, as I said, my brother-in-law had a Chick-fil-A. So I would work for free in his store. So when I got off from shift work, if it was 7 in the morning, I would go work from 7 to 12 in his store to sling fries, work alongside the employees, to understand the business, go home, get sleep, and go back to work. And I did that for about 3 months or so.
Do you think that made you want the job even more?
Well, yeah, because like I said, I didn't like fast food when I was a kid, but that was a bad side of it. And the benefit of me doing that, and he told me, he said, "Lo, Chick-fil-A is different." And when we started looking at the companies and their values, we did notice there was a difference. They believed what they said. They actually backed everything they said. It wasn't just a feel-good statement for the company, that they put their money where their mouth was in everything they did, even being closed on Sunday. And I told my wife, I said, "Man, what better thing is this? I don't have to work shift work, close on a Sunday." At the time I was a youth pastor, I get to work with kids, till I get to help try and mentor one way or another, that I could be a coach, a mentor, and an owner and a boss all at the same time.
And the foolish trust but the wise test. So you were testing it out to see if this is something you would even want to commit to.
I might be getting a little off topic, but have you ever used that in an argument with an employee that was like complaining or something? Like, yeah, I used to do this for free. You know?
Yeah, actually I do, believe it or not. When some
That's
people,
awesome.
because a lot of times, the one thing I want to say that I definitely want to allude to, and that's kind of why we're right in the middle of it, is I used to tell my kids this growing up all the time. There are things in life you don't want to do that you have to do. You don't think you do, but the more you don't do it, the worse your life gets. Okay, so knowing that you have to do it, you need to face the challenge and do it, because it makes you grow. I.e., finances. If you are responsible, once again, in the things that you do, you will grow, and the rich will become richer, just like you said earlier.
Dad always told us being a man is not doing what you want to do, it's doing what you don't want to do.
It is. And it's so very true. And so much so that when I was telling you earlier, I did a lot of things I didn't want to do, like pick up paper off the ground in a parking lot. One of my bosses at Procter & Gamble came to me and said, "We want you to go do a planning role. It's a straight day role, and nobody has survived this role." It was a 100% dropout rate. It was a very stressful role. And
You're getting off of shift work now. You're doing just dated like a 9 to 5 type thing.
yes, and you got to understand Procter & Gamble's union. Folgers was union. So I could have technically said no, I'm going to file a grievance because you got to bid that job out. But they said, no, we think you have the math skills and the
Do you think they were partly trying to get rid of you?
No, actually, just the opposite. It's because the people they put in the role, they either go out on disability or quit. Because the role's stressful, it was a planning role. Because basically, when Walmart and Sam's orders coffee, my job was to take the number of cases they wanted and convert it back to pounds roasted. So I need to go tell and put out a schedule. You're going to roast this many pounds of Colombian, this many pounds of Arabicas, this many pounds of Indonesian beans. And you're going to blend it to the blend we want, and then you're going to make this many cases out of it. So, Walmart, Sam's, Winn-Dixie, whoever's ordering coffee from us gets the right amount of cases, so you don't run out. So it was a planning role, is what it was. And we used a very expensive German program, a very complicated program. At the time, the acronym was SAP, S-A-P. I couldn't pronounce it because it's German, and hated it. Hated the role. You got to get up very early in the morning. You wore a beeper. We didn't have cell phones. But the way the role worked is, and that's why people left the role, is because, like, if I was out fishing with friends and my beeper went off, bring me to the dock, I got to go to work.
Yes,
And
something's wrong. Sounds like it's all you. It's all on you.
Well, it is. And if it was 2 a.m. and there was a fire in one of the roasters, well, that just messed up my schedule. So you got a phone call. All right, you're not going to get the beans you wanted. So now I got to go in. I got to rearrange the schedule and re-put it back out. So you had no life.
Your level of responsibility skyrockets.
It does, and they would make it to try and balance that out. Like if I had to go put in a bunch of extra hours going in at 2 a.m. or a day off, I could flex my schedule and take off early another day.
So this is happening as you're being kind of somewhat offered this idea of Chick-fil-A.
Not quite. It was probably about 2-3 years earlier. But if I would, the point is, if I would have said no, I want to file agreements, I never would have done that role, and I hated that role. I hated it the whole time I was in that role, and it's supposed to be a 3-year rotation. I was in it for maybe 4 years, and I went to a boss who I respected. He respected me. We had a good level, and I told him I really wanted to get out of that role and get into something else and more of what I wanted to do. But they didn't want to let me out because it's very hard to find someone to do that role.
And you were doing a good job at that role.
And
so
I was doing a good enough job, but they did not want to let me out.
Yeah.
So I successfully rotated out of the role eventually, yes. My manager at the time said he took a lot of heat for it. He made the decision to let me get out the role, which God just opened that door a certain way. And that's when I went into the CNIS role. And then about three years after that is when I interviewed with Chick-fil-A. I was going through the process of talking and dealing and doing those things.
So I want to come back to, did you have a question?
What exactly is the CNIS role?
So CNIS is controls and instrumentation. It's when you deal with plants, you have automated equipment, robots that run things, conveyor belts. Well, they all run off of programming, like a red light. A red light runs off of programming. Turns yellow, red. It's got timers and sensors and pressure sensors in the ground. So when that fails, someone has to go out there and find out what failed. So it's the same thing. When a coffee stops making on the machine, a conveyor belt goes down. Well, was it a photo eye? Was it an electric photo cell? Was it a gearbox that just broke and it's a more mechanical, not electrical? We dealt more electrical.
Did you like that job as
Loved
opposed
it.
to?
I actually loved that job.
Was the pay similar?
Pay was the same because Procter & Gamble, they don't pay more for one than the other. But loved the role. I can't say that the company was the greatest morally, but it was a good job, and I did my job.
I did want to bring it back, though, to where you were at with serving in your brother-in-law's store for free.
Yeah.
Back to that point where you're now serving for free and testing the waters to see if this is something that you want. What was the next step in that process?
So yeah, in doing that, when they came down to interview me, they decided to send 2 people down. One just retired from Chick-fil-A, actually, and I'm very happy for him. And the other one, I believe she's still with Chick-fil-A. So this lady and gentleman came down, and as I prayed about it, God gave me some good knowledge in how to interview. I mean, I haven't interviewed in 17 years. You have to realize that. I'm working a job that's in production, and I'm trying to get into a fast food franchise. So when they came down, the first thing I did was I showed them my family. I showed them my wife and my kids, and how old my children were, and how I met my wife, just so they knew who I was. And then we talked about work and what I did at Procter & Gamble. And the one thing that really stood out was the planning role, the one I did not want to do. Why? Because if I would have said no, I would not have learned how to plan. And they said, if you can plan for coffee, you can plan for chicken. That's the way they looked at it. They looked at it like, if you can plan for millions of dollars of coffee to Sam's and Walmart, then you should be able to plan for a number of cases of chicken you should have to order and sell in a day and reorder. So they saw the correlation in the very job I did not want to do, but I did do regardless. In fact, I even told them I didn't want to do the job. Is it mandatory? And they said, yes, it's mandatory. You have to show up Monday morning here. And I could have filed a grievance, like I said, but I didn't. I said, well, let me be clear. I don't want to do the job, but I will be honest with you. I won't do it begrudgingly. I'll do it with all my whole heart. I'll do the best I can do in that role. I don't want to do it, but I will do the best I can at it. And I did for a number of years. I put my heart into the job. Always tried to improve things in that job to make it better. But if I didn't do it, I would not be where I'm at today. So that's what I tell the employees when they don't want to do a job, is you don't know where you're going to be at in 10, 15, 20 years. And these things that you're doing now are preparing you to handle the next level. And that's what God did with me. He opened a door when I didn't see the door yet. He already started to get me prepared to walk through that door.
It's hindsight is always 20/20.
Exactly.
And you're going from one test to the next, and whether you pass or fail it, it'll just keep reoccurring until you can get to that thing.
Yeah.
That goes back to what you said in the beginning, how you're not working for somebody. If it's a job you hate, you're just going to do what you can, like whether it's picking up trash in the morning or just doing the best you can at it.
Well,
That's pretty cool.
And you live miserable your whole life, and that's what people just say, I can't wait to get out of here. And I remember I had that same attitude. I really did. When I first got hired, I was a young kid. And I remember a guy that was celebrating his 20-year anniversary at Folgers. And I went to school with his son. And he was the dad. And I said, man, 20 years, how much longer you got to work? He said, 20 more. I felt so dejected. I got 40 more years to do this.
Yeah.
I felt so dejected.
I was going to ask, after that interview, did they offer you any type of Chick-fil-A ownership, or how did that work? Was there another? How many steps in the process were there?
Many steps, because they want to be sure that they're getting into business with the right person, because it's a partnership. The way they do their franchises at the time, they really were considered franchises or considered partnerships. But yes, after the interview process, most interviews, you do an interview, they tell you whether you get the job or not. Here I had to do an interest card, I had to do a phone interview, then they fly down and did an in-person interview. Then after the in-person interview, you wait to hear, and it's either going to be, hey, we appreciate, everything you've done, but we're not going to move forward at this point. You can reapply in the future if you get more experience. Or there's more interest, in which case they say, we're going to fly you out to Atlanta. And they're going to do another set of interviews.
That must have been exciting for you.
Well, it was. We had heard about the flying up to Atlanta. Things went well, and that was about 3 weeks after we had the actual sit-down interview. And I had to fly to Atlanta.
Sounds like a long 3 weeks.
It was the longest interview I've ever done. It was the most vigorous interview I've ever done. It was the most intense interview. Nicest interview, by the way, too. But I learned a lot about personalities and people. And flying up there, they picked me up from the airport, not realizing that the interview started from the time they picked me up. Because you got a driver that comes to get you. And at the time, I'm sure it's changed now. I'm going back 17 years. They would pick me up and bring me to home office. And you fly in the morning, and they're going to do 2 or 3 interviews with you that day. And they go over, your experience. They'll go over maybe even financial things with you.
Now, what do you mean by the interview started as soon as you landed? Was the driver a part of Chick-fil-A and listening in?
He was, but he's made to maybe ask certain questions.
So he's profiling you the whole time.
He's basically in the manner of saying, what type of person are you? Like, hey, Jordan, it's a pleasure to meet you. And you might say, hey, yeah, good to meet you. And throwing you back in a limo, and he's driving you over there, and the whole time he's like, man, how was the flight? Normal questions. But if you're on your phone and you're not looking, you're not interacting, that will go back to corporate.
How was the flight? A lot of Jews on that flight.
Yeah, I mean, it's not good if and they want to get to know you, and anybody does. Anybody you want to bring into your organization, why wouldn't you get to know the real person, not a persona that you're putting on for someone to get a job? And they're very smart about what they do and how they do it.
Yeah, it's easy to show up for a day, but it's not easy to show up, for the whole month.
I kind of want to
Yeah.
go through that process now, knowing the driver's kind of interviewing me. Be like, how was the flight? They serve steak. Kind of wish they were serving chicken. It kind of wasn't my cup of tea.
Yeah, it's once they get you there, you got normal interviews. Like I said, they're going to go over the things that you filled out on in your application process and your resume and what you have on there. You spend a night. They put you up in a hotel, very nice hotel. The next morning, they come get you again, and you're going to interview again for another 4 to 6 hours before they send you home. So you go through 2 days of interviews with various people from different parts of the organization. Then they will send you back home, and then you have to wait.
Now, when you were there, I do remember a story of them making you, and maybe this might be the wrong place, but I believe they made you wait for 2 hours for one of the interviews. Was that correct?
So they do. They make you wait on purpose. That's part of the interview process again. And these,
It's like Musashi.
these are all tactics that are used to see who you really are. If they see you getting frustrated because they said they're going to come get you in a minute, you've been sitting there for 30 minutes, they see the true you. If you're patient, they have magazines. They want to see what magazines you pick up off the couch. Each magazine has something in it, I'm sure, and I'm sure they see what magazine you pick gives them a little bit more of that profile of what type of person you may be.
He's just sitting there looking at the Sports Illustrated swimsuit.
Yeah, I'm sure that's not going to help you.
Just flicking through.
Yeah. What's your wife sitting right next to you?
Well, this one you're alone, and then you go back. And if they move forward, then you'll get another phone call, and generally that's the final wrap up. They're looking for anything not to give you a store. This is where they want to talk you out of it, actually. So you do your interviews, your normal interviews. They have their ways of looking how you interact, sitting on the couch, waiting, if you're patient, non-patient, all of that. It took a while. Probably say maybe another month went by, and we got a phone call to go back up to corporate with your spouse. So now they're going to interview you and your spouse. So now they fly me and my wife up.
Where are you at this point? You're like, man, what is the deal?
Well, it's taking a long time. And the whole time, I know it's getting closer to a decision. I'm telling Procter & Gamble at the same time, friends that I work with, hey, I might not be here. I mean, it's a long shot, but I don't know if I'm going to be here in a few months. And like everybody, it's a good job. So what do you think they say? You're not going anywhere, dude.
So that your friends or your supervisors?
Mostly friends. One supervisor knew because I put him down as a reference.
So you give them a heads up.
Yep. And then he actually got called by Chick-fil-A. He was my supervisor and he got called. And I put my pastor down as a reference. I put my supervisor down as a reference.
At this point, I would be surprised if they didn't call.
Well, that's what I'm saying. As thorough as they are, they called every one of them. And they all came to me and said, they called me. They were very thorough. They checked their references. What's your examples of what you should be doing to run a business?
They came to your house while you were sleeping. They looked through
and took some DNA samples.
Spoiler alert, he got the job.
But it was it taught me a lot about the organization, that I did want to be part of that I liked the way they were doing things, to be honest with you. It was different than other jobs where even in the job I was in, it was some people worked hard, some people didn't, and you just pick up the slack of everybody else. I truly believe the motto of what the Bible said: you don't work, you don't eat. So I wanted a job. That's another main reason why I wanted to go with Chick-fil-A, is I want something I can control and say the more I put into this, the more I should get out of it. In other words, there's no ceiling anymore. Okay, I'm not capped at a job that says, okay, you went as high as you can go, and somebody else is making the same money you're making, but they don't have the work you're doing. And that's on the company. I never resented the company for it. That's their money. If that's how they want to spend their money and pay someone to do half the work, who am I to say, I don't think it's right, but who am I to say, well, you have to change that? They're paying me, I'm not paying them.
Yeah. That almost reminds me of it's a saying I just heard where they were talking about happiness and how to get joy out of anything, and it broke down to outward service plus internal growth equals happiness. So like as you're serving your community and you're doing something that you believe in, just like this podcast that may add value to people's lives that listen to it, on top of that there's internal growth for me personally. So whether I interview somebody or whoever's on and I learn from them, I then either read or I study, and then I now have internal growth in the same way of you working for Chick-fil-A. You're now growing as an individual. There's no more ceiling for you. You can now provide for your family even better and grow yourself, but you're also serving your community in a sense.
Yeah, and like I said, the last interview they try and talk you out of it. They scare you. They really do. They'll come in there and they say, "Why do you want to do this? You have a good job." Like I did. I had a good job. You have money put away. Why you want to do this? And they'll ask those same questions now, like why Chick-fil-A? And it's not about making the money. Like I told them, it wasn't about that for me. I believed in the organization. I loved what they stood on, and I wanted to be a part of something. And I love the fact that I could be a part of and make a difference in young people's lives and in the community. And that's what I saw as value to me, to be involved with that part of the organization. So yeah, you had questions centered around that. They had tough questions that they would ask that I'm not going to get involved in here on a podcast, especially because today the political climate's so out there, but they'll ask you questions around, how would you promote, who would you promote, and why would you promote that way, and they're a private organization. They're not publicly traded, they can ask those things based on the fact of what type of person, trying to find out what type of person you are.
Those circumstances will arise when owning any type of business, especially if you are Chick-fil-A and you are known as a Christian organization. They're going to be seen under a certain light.
Well, and that's the misconception, right? A lot of people look at it a certain way, not understanding the business. They can ask those questions because they're not hiring you as an employee. You're another owner. So they're in a partnership. So they want to make sure that you can treat everybody equally, so they're going to ask certain questions too.
And I think that's where Chick-fil-A differs from other franchises who, like, let's say you own a Subway or Burger King. Chick-fil-A is not. They're different. They're partnering with you. They're believing in you. Like they're buying the. You're not paying a franchising fee. They're buying you the location. They're building all that for you. So you're not coming out hundreds of $1,000s to get started. They're footing that cost. I mean, am I right about that?
Yes. No. Chick-fil-A, the way they do it is they'll find a location.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to build a building, and they want to find a partner to partner with them for that business. So technically, Chick-fil-A owns the building. They own the property. We as franchisees do not. We own the employees and the food. So we hire and we buy the food, and naturally they get their percentages back, and they get a higher percentage than they would say a Burger King, a McDonald's, a Taco Bell. And that money gets reinvested to keep doing the same things over and over. And it's a good model. It's a perfect model the way it works.
All the risk is on them.
The risk is on them. The buy-in now, I think, is $10,000.
I think it used to be 5.
It was
right?
5 when I got in. They finally raised that to 10. It was $5,000, and that's to show them that you were serious, that you can save money.
Yeah, in the grand scheme of things, it's not much money for franchising. Yeah,
not for millions of dollars being invested. And if you couldn't save money, then you're not exactly telling them you can do this. So yeah, you had to have money saved, and to get in, they did all the investment up front. Now, there's a plus and a negative to their model, right? Their model is that, like I asked at one point, they made it very clear, and I understood that. I said, if one store's not doing well, you can get another store. And they said, no, absolutely not. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, maybe I heard wrong. And they were like, no, yeah, you heard wrong. They said, now, on the record, we make a deal with you for this location. This is your location that we partner with you with. If you run that location into the ground, why would we give you another opportunity?
Yeah, this is what you're responsible for. We want you to
do
take
well
it
what you
and
have.
keep it.
Yeah.
This is your land. We want you to prosper in it.
Now, off the record, if you did well, then they might tell you, you can see what other opportunities are available. And if there's something available, then I can reapply to try and become a franchise owner at another location. So, like they said, who wants to get rid of a good business person, though? Nobody. So, technically, on the record, yes. No, it's for that location only.
Yeah, but they don't want to stifle you. And
Well, and they proved that to me, right? When Katrina came in 2005, I was an owner for 3 months. The whole mall went down.
So
and it was going to be down for 3 years. I had no store.
So you became an owner, and then Katrina happened.
3 months later. And they could have told me, sorry, Nick, you did okay, but you got to find another job. Your store's gone.
Today's sponsor is America First Advertising. Looking to boost your business's visibility? Meet America First Advertising, your go-to solution for digital signage and space. With networks spanning from Baton Rouge to Mississippi, they offer 25 screens in each network, those locations in high traffic venues like Walmart, Subway, doctor's offices, restaurants, and gyms. So you can imagine your ad being seen over 1,350 times in a single week. Ready to start your advertising? You can visit americafirstadvertising.com, or you can give them a call at 985-615-2680. America Advertising, where your business comes first. I would definitely recommend using these guys. Their screens are literally all over. I can't go anywhere without seeing a screen. So it's highly likely if you're sitting at a restaurant for 30 minutes to an hour, you're gonna see your ad. If you're interested, americafirstadvertising.com, or you can give them a call at 985-615-2680.
So the store you had though at Oakwood, I don't remember the details about it, but I don't think it was a super successful store right when you got it.
Actually, it was pretty successful. It's worked its way up to then. But to be honest, I wasn't making any more money than I was making at Folgers. I was started to make a little bit more. It was starting to grow when Katrina hit. So it was a little more than maybe 20% more, I'd say. It was
Were you
comparable.
working more?
Yes, I was, because I wanted to make a go of it. Like I said, I can finally control something. So I didn't get into it to say, hey, someone else can do this. It's an investment. I had a lot to learn. I was switching over of career for 17 years. So, yeah, I actually would run breakfast to businesses in the morning. So I was up at 6 a.m. still, even though a mall didn't open up till 9 to get there to get the breakfast to run it. Because in a mall, you only have maybe 20 employees. You can't afford to miss one, or you're really short. So you are the owner. You are also one of the employees. You run your own schedules. You do your own trucks. Small operation. Remember, they weren't not as big as they are now. So yeah, I would order my own food, unload my own 18-wheeler trucks, bring all my food into my store, and that was part of the deal. Is that we were involved in our stores.
Oh, and you're also learning how to manage people now as well.
Yes,
You're
you have to
having do
manage
interviews and
adults and young people, and how to interact with each other.
yeah, because before you're working for a company and you're worried about yourself and how the work that you produce for this company at Procter & Gamble, but now you're worried about I don't want to say worried, but
Yeah.
you're now focused on not just the business but also the individuals helping you in that business.
Well, when you become a business owner, you really get close to the people you work with. You start realizing I'm responsible for these people. They have lives, they have kids, they have families, and I don't want to ruin it for them. You have a different burden. That's why you have to be ready. People say they want to do it, but you do kind of have to be ready. So yeah, I worked very hard to run the best numbers I can run, because the person who had them all before me was very good with numbers, and he ran very good numbers. So I wanted to prove I could run good numbers. He was very well respected, and that's why he was leaving. He got the first freestanding Chick-fil-A that was being built in our location. So when he left, it opened up his mall, and that's why I got slated to go into his mall. And
The first freestanding location for
Chick-fil-A,
In Louisiana?
yeah. Well, no, not Louisiana, but in the New Orleans greater area. So it's not in New Orleans. It was actually in Covington at the time. It was off of 190. That was the first Chick-fil-A being built, a freestanding unit with a drive-through.
Oh, that store's busy.
Yeah. And he does good. He's still same
he's
owner.
still there?
Yeah, he's still there.
Nice.
He's actually got 2 locations now. I'm very happy. He's worked very hard for those locations. But he was a good operator. I was following this good guy who knew the business very well, and he loves numbers. So I have to show that I can do this. So I'm out getting every sale I could. I'm getting up at 6 a.m., running food to offices, coming back, grabbing lunch and running those for lunch, then coming back and have to start my own paperwork. Have to start, scheduling and balancing drawers and ordering food and doing trucks. And, 3, 4 o'clock, you're tired. And you're like, hey, get to go home. But nope. One of the kids say, hey, I can't make it tonight. I got homework or I'm sick. Well, guess who's closing tonight?
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, how did it doing this now affect your personal life? Because you had 2 kids at the time.
It was hard,
right?
actually. It's a good thing you bring that up. My dad had died in transition. So he died while I was at Procter & Gamble. And I want to say he died in 01, late 01, almost 02. So it was a few years, and I was having a hard time with it. And in 05, late 05, I was coming home from the mall one day, late. I didn't quite close that day. I got off about 6:30, and there was a minister by the name of Mark Bredenkamp, and he works in a prophetic. And heard him a few times. He's called people up, prophesied on them, and the whole time my dad had passed, I had my own little prayer that I would say, Lord, where's my dad? When you face death, there's certain fears that you have. Some people are more calm about it. As Christians, most of us are, and that kind of messed with me, with my dad. Even though 2 days before he died, he made me wheel him to his neighbor to go witness to him, told his neighbor he needs to get in church. And 2 days later, my dad had passed. Proud of him for that moment to fight cancer and get out the bed to go do that. But yeah, it messed with me really bad. And I'd pray every night. My wife didn't know. Going to work, that's why I shed my own tears by myself. And I would ask God, where's my dad? Where's my dad? And he knew it was a burden. It was a big burden I carried. And I switched jobs in that point, and I had that whole burden. So it was affecting me on the inside.
So your dad passed, and you're going through this lengthy process
Yes.
of getting to Chick-fil-A.
Yes.
And that's a lot of things to juggle all at the same time.
Yeah, my dad was a very simple man, but he was a very good man. And you don't realize how much you really love someone till you lose them. And when I was coming home, I still remember the guy who worked in prophetic, Mark. He was at a church, and I just wanted to go home. And the Holy Spirit kept pressing on me. God just kept putting in my heart, you need to go, you need to go. And I'm like, no, I don't want to go. I'm just going to go home. It's late. They already started. They're going to be packed. I even passed the church up. Get to the next red light, and God's just really putting it on my heart. And reluctantly, I make the U-turn, go back, and I'm
like, it's just something that, and for viewers, because whoever watches this,
Yeah.
they may not understand, but you're
Yeah.
saying it's something where it's like you had to do it. It's a very compelling feeling.
Yeah. So when people say God speaks to them, my own personal point of view, like I tell people, I've never had an audible voice. God never came to me and said, you will say this. It's always been something compelling inside of me, and I've always watched it come to pass. And when I know, It's kind of hard to explain, but when you have experience in something, it's almost like and it takes time to figure that out. As you get closer to God and He draws closer to you, you start to hear Him more clearly, consciously or subconsciously.
Maybe that's my problem. I always get that feeling, and I'm like, no thanks. You're not gonna get me.
You think it's a guy trying to make a deal?
You're not
with
gonna
it.
trick me.
Not to get off topic, but there was the Stoics. Socrates actually believed in the same thing. I just found this out from reading that he actually called it a daemonian or something like that. I'm probably butchering the word, but the way he referred to it was the essence of who he actually was. And if he didn't listen to that thing, then he wasn't fully becoming himself, essentially. I don't know how to explain it exactly, but it's in the same type of how we refer to as the Holy Spirit. It's that
It's
guiding light, essentially.
once you understand it, it's like experiencing anything. When you experience it, you have experience in it. Okay, so there's been 3 or 4 times. It's like I'll use one example. A friend of mine who's now passed away. Actually, him and his wife both passed away, and he was dating what was going to become his wife, and they had some troubles. He was a lot younger than her, and some people in the church did not want them to date, and couldn't understand why at the time. She was older, he was younger. They wanted to keep them apart, and she even told him, I don't want to see you anymore. She broke up with him, and it was tearing him apart because he really loved her. And me and my wife were going to go on vacation, and he said, I just got to get away. I want to go on vacation with you. And right then and there, as fast as he said the words, God spoke to my heart, and it wasn't an audible voice. And I looked at him and I said, "You're not going to go." His guy's name was Tristan. I said, "You're not going to go." And he's like, "No, I'm going." I said, "Tristan, I don't know how to tell you this. I can't explain it. I'm just telling you. You're more welcome to. I didn't tell you, you're more welcome to come, but I don't think you're going. We're leaving in a week." He pulls out a $100 deposit and he goes, "Here's a $100 deposit. Take my cash. I'm telling you, I'm going." And we start talking a little bit later. He goes, "Why would you say I'm not going to go?" I said, "Because God put in my heart that the reason why you're not going to go is that you're going to marry the girl you want to marry." Because there's no way I can't see her. I'm not supposed to see her. And for those who don't know, your dad's pastor. He was praying in the church, and at the time your dad wasn't the pastor. He was another brother in the church praying, and he started praying that I'm going to give up. Tristan did. "I'm going to give up. I'm going to let it go. They don't want me to see her. I'm done with it." And your dad walked up to him, was praying for him. He tapped him on the shoulder, not even knowing what he just prayed, and said, "God's telling me to tell you whatever you're about ready to give up, don't give up. Keep pressing in." And he turned around and walked away. So he shared that with me in a parking lot. He didn't tell your dad that he told me that, but Tristan told me that. And I said, well, that confirms in me what I'm hearing, that I think you're going to marry. He goes, no, I'll be on vacation, you guys, in a week. I'm not supposed to talk to her. 3 days later, he called me up. He said, I'm engaged. Okay? It was just that fast, and I can't explain it. No audible voice for me whatsoever. But there's been multiple times. And since then, it's like, I know what I know. I don't care what you tell me. It's like if you watch a game that's already been played and you're just watching a recording of it. There's nothing you say is going to change it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's already recorded. It's going to play. It's going to play out, no matter whether you like it or not.
Yeah, I like asking what it means, because people who I guess aren't in faith, it's a very hard thing to understand, and many people mock it, which understandably so.
Well, it's easy to mock what you don't know.
That's what I was going to say. It's easy to make fun of something you can't understand.
And if you don't want to understand it, it's all that much more to make fun of it because you're afraid of it.
Correct.
Because you may have to face the reality of it.
And I didn't want to get.
No, I understand. I said those things because when God put on my heart to go back to the church, I had to sit in the back row, way in the back, against the wall.
Not to cut you out real quick, you went back to there's Mark Bredenkamp.
Yes.
You said he works in a prophetic. Does that mean like he's a traveling evangelist, or what is that?
So I'm going to tell you how God brings things full circle, okay? So since we're talking about, and it all ties into Chick-fil-A, believe it or not, okay?
Yeah.
So basically, I go back to the church, and Mark Bredenkamp is from South Africa. He's not from the States. He comes here to help minister, almost like a missionary, and he goes back to South Africa. And
travels all around, pretty
travels
much.
all around, and he'll speak into people's lives in front of everybody. And I've seen him speak into my friends' lives. Like, there's no way anybody knows that. There's no way it's almost like someone went and told him about the individual, like your own dad. He called your dad up as a pastor and said he saw him working in the prison ministry, and he had a workout ministry. And yes, kids were working out with your dad at the time, and your dad went to the prison ministry, and he said these things to him. So I've seen him, and I've never been called by him. But it tells you how God works. He wanted me there at that time. And when I went there and sat in the back row, they do a little bit of worship, and then he'll start praying, and then all of a sudden he'll start maybe calling people up. And he pointed in the back. He said, you young man back there, stand up. And when he pointed, I'm so far in the back, I'm looking left and right. He goes, yeah, the one looking to the left and to the right, stand up. And I point at myself. He goes, yeah, you, stand up. And I stand up. He says, come here, young man. So I go down the aisle.
How old were you at this time?
Oh, my God, I'm 35, 36.
Oh, young man had to feel good.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
ooh, that's what I'm talking about.
I come down there, and he starts praying on me. And the things he starts saying, I've never cried so hard in my life, actually, because he starts prophesying over my life. And I love to hear him minister. It's great to hear him minister. And he as he prophesied over me, he said, I see there's been some shaking around you. And we just talked about the hard time I was going through.
When you say prophesy, could that also mean
Yes.
speaking into your life?
So he was speaking into my life almost if God was giving him the words to tell me. And prophetic could not always be futuristic. It could be speaking about your past, but he doesn't know it unless God tells him. He don't have a crystal ball. He can only go by what God tells him. I've never met him before. He's from South Africa. He don't know my dad passed away. That's what the prophetic is. It's not always fortune telling. That's the confusion. It's God using him to speak to you as a certain way. And when he started saying that there was some shaking about me, I was going through a hard time within my church. I was going through a hard time with my dad passing and switching jobs and trying to make a go of being involved with Chick-fil-A. And he said, my wife wasn't there, nor were my kids there. I went by myself because I was coming home from work. And he said, I see that there's been shaking around you, and the devil will want your kids. He said, but he'll not get one of them. No, not one of them. I didn't tell him I was a youth pastor, and I didn't tell him I had kids. How do you know I have kids? Now, you can say it's generalization. I get that. But then it gets so much more detailed to where each thing, if it talks like a duck, quacks like a duck, acts like a duck, you're going to have to assume it's a duck at some point. And he also said that when people say, thus saith the Lord, it's as if God is speaking through them.
What are some of the other things that he said that were...
So this was one of the things that he said that I started crying real heavily and sobbing. That was my dad. When it got to my dad. And he said, I sense that there's someone in your life you miss greatly. And I knew that. Tears started coming out. Couldn't control it. He said, and you miss him terribly. He said, and you've often asked me, where is he? Nobody knew that. My wife, my kids, I never told them. That was my own secret prayer every night, every day going to work. In transition to my new job from my old job, going in to be with Chick-fil-A as an owner at Chick-fil-A, coming home. And even that night, I didn't want to stop there because my dad was on my mind. He was on my heart. And I said, where's my dad? Where's my dad? And he said, you've often asked me, where is he? Those exact words. And he said, I'm here to tell you he's with me and forever will be. And I still got the tape. I still got the audio tape to this day. And it wasn't that God just wanted to speak to me as much as God trying to tell me, stop worrying. A burden was lifted off of me when that prophetic word was given to me, as if to say, you're worrying about the wrong things. We all face life. We all face death. We all have an appointed time. But really my focus was more on my dad, and there's a grieving period, but it was almost as if God was saying, you're worrying about the wrong things. And from that point, yeah, Katrina hit, a lot of turbulence in people's lives. I switched stores. It's the very thing we talked about. I only made a deal for that store, but yet Chick-fil-A liked what I did. They treated me with the utmost dignity and respect after Katrina. They made sure that my family was taken care of. The founder had one of the home office people call me up, and he said, we got a private jet. We're going to come get you, and you can stay at his house in Florida. He's got a condo in Florida that you can stay at. Remember, I mean, they're making more money now. The founder's in a much better position, but he's the opposite of what we call Al Copeland. Al Copeland, it's how he lived. It was great. He had the house with all the lights. He was a flashy guy, and we loved Al Copeland being part of Louisiana. I worked for Al when I was a kid at the #1 store in Araby, Louisiana. But Truett was the opposite. As a founder, he taught Sunday school until he was 92. Loved the Lord. Has over 200 to 300 foster kids at the time when I was there. He bought a college to give all his foster kids free college. Legally adopted some of those foster kids into his own family as a founder. And for this man to call me up and say, we got a private jet, we're going to come get you and bring you to one of the condos in Florida, I literally started just breaking down over the phone. I said, no, we got taken care of where we at. I appreciate that the offer's there, though.
It sounds like many things you can argue about when it comes to someone's morals, but it sounds like he was just genuinely a good guy.
He was, I felt completely honored and blessed to completely meet him and his family, especially him. The stuff that he would say, like one of the quotes came out recently. There was another chicken chain growing up in the north, Chicago. And when chains start to grow, they start investing heavily. And they start throwing money at it. But you don't know what the economy is going to do. You have to be careful with that. And Chick-fil-A was like, man, we're growing so slow, because Truett was a slow but steady guy. That's how he was. And they kept going to him and saying, Truett, we got to open more stores. We got to open more stores. We open more stores. And they kept hounding him with it. This other chains, they already passed the number of stores we have. And in one of the meetings, he slammed his books down on the desk, and he, in his true Southern accent from Georgia, he said, dang it, I don't want to talk about no more getting bigger. He said, you want to get bigger? Get better. Let your customers demand you get bigger. And truer words have not been spoken, because a lot of companies, they get so big they forget themselves. And that was his fear. He didn't want to outgrow who he was. What you're going to do it to your best ability. And the other company actually 2 years later went out of business. They went bankrupt. And yet they continue to thrive on their models of what they do. But yeah, after Mark Bredenkamp, it was a change in my life that really the weight lifted.
I'm curious, did you, so you did get on that private jet? And
I did not, no. I told him I appreciated the offer, but someone gave us a place to stay in Houston. I had family. I didn't want to be responsible for breaking anything in the man's condo, but that he had my back to watch my family is just incredible. Like, I was touched by it. And they said, if you need anything, you let us know. Then they used me as a type of consulting person after Katrina to help out where I was just needed most. So I went to different stores helping people. And then basically a store opened up. I transitioned over to the Esplanade Mall. I was there for 3 years while they rebuilt Oakwood. Went back to Oakwood for 3 more years, and then went out to Slidell. And that's where the Freestander is, in Slidell. So yes, I put in for different locations like we talked about, because once again, you do well. They do want to have good business people to be in business with. But the whole reason why I brought up Mark, bread and camp and put that in because it is Chick-fil-A. Why? Because at Chick-fil-A, every Monday morning they have devotion. It's optional. They don't make anybody go. But if you want to go to devotion, they'll bring different speakers in.
It's at the store. I mean,
It's at home office. Literally at the place of work. And you don't have to go. They'll have it in a cafeteria, and they'll set up a little stage. They'll bring in youth groups.
this is at every single Chick-fil-A.
No. Home office.
What is that? What is home office?
Home
Like
office
the main
is
store?
that is corporate.
Okay.
Corporate headquarters.
Gotcha.
Corporate headquarters. So we call it home office. Now it's called
which is in Georgia, correct?
Yeah, there's another name now. They don't really call it home office anymore. The facility center, I think, but it's I'm just used to home office. It's been so many years. I got 18 years in with Chick-fil-A now. So going there, they've expanded in their properties, big piece of property there, beautiful grounds. But all the people that work there's thousands of people that work there now. Every Monday morning, they've done it ever since, is they want to glorify God by being a faithful steward. That's all that's been entrusted to them.
Now, I will say that I think there's been misconceptions that they want to hire people that are Christian or of that faith or non-denominational or something along those lines. But there is many Muslims and other denominations that do own Chick-fil-A stores.
So yes, that is a misconception. Nowhere in the application process does it ask what church you attend. Nowhere in any of the questions they ask you, they want to know about your religious background. If you volunteer that information, that is on you. But there's many operators that I know that they don't go to church. They have a sense of morality, yes. That's why they were brought into the business, because they're looking for someone with moral values. The misconception is they think that Chick-fil-A is a church, and it's not. It's a business. It's a for-profit business. It's not a non-profit. So the best way to explain it to people is that we're a for-profit business, but we run it according to biblical principles. Being closed on Sunday, it's a biblical principle. So the business runs on biblical principles, but it's not a charity. We love to do charitable things. We think it's a great way to be involved with our communities, and we're so blessed that we can do those things. But the misconception is that they think that it's just a charity, and it's not. Or they'll say, well, you're supposed to be a Christian business. It's like, well, yeah, the business itself runs off of Christian principles, and we follow biblical standards by what we do, yes. But it's still a for-profit business at the end of the day.
Does Chick-fil-A impose any type of, not rule, but any type of like policy that you have to do so much per charity? Per store owner, like you don't have to give away free meals or do anything for charity. That's just on you.
And just like you said earlier, does everybody have to be religious? No. There's some owners who's given to causes I would never give to. That's their choice. If they choose to take that money from that location in their community to do something that I disagree with, once again, it's America. They can choose to do so. I might not do that, and I give to my own charities that I choose to give to my personal money. Chick-fil-A does their own charities. They don't do it from the Chick-fil-A organization. They do some of those things, but the family gives where they want to give. That's on them. It's their own personal money.
They're a business, and they're essentially wanting you to run that business well. I think you're essentially almost a glorified manager of a location of Chick-fil-A, if that makes sense.
So yes, people say that, but it's not really the case, because you're not an employee. According to the IRS, I have a federal ID number. I have to file my own taxes based on owning a business. It's what we file has nothing to do with Chick-fil-A being an employee of Chick-fil-A. Technically, they can't fire you. But yeah, stores can be repossessed. But that's in any franchise. You could buy a McDonald's and don't think they can't take it away. Because you buy a McDonald's doesn't mean you own McDonald's Corporation. What it means is you own that McDonald's. And that McDonald's on the top of that building, you don't own. So even though you may own the land in the building, and this happened to the Pizza Huts down here. If you notice, all the Pizza Huts went out of business. He got in an argument with corporate, and he said, I own these buildings. And they said, yeah, you do, but you don't own the name Pizza Hut. Take them off your buildings. You're done. And if you notice, all the Pizza Huts were empty for a while, the older stores. They were empty because it didn't matter what franchise you have. You don't own that corporation. So at the end of the day, it's like that with Chick-fil-A. They're my partner. And you know what? The best way I can explain it is, you can say it's a 50-50, but at the end of the day, I'm just a silent partner, to be honest with you. And I like it like that. they know what they're doing. They're a great company to work with, and I don't mind following their lead, and at the same time partnering with them and doing the best I can do to be a part of a great
it
organization.
makes sense that their interview process and hiring process is so strict, because if you're not taking care of their business, like your business as well, if you're not taking care of it, then they're out a lot of money, because they're putting a lot of money into you.
Well, they are, and you can hurt the whole brand, which hurts everybody.
You could walk away right now and be like, yeah, y'all got to deal with this.
Yeah, and I give you an
You're not out of
example of
nothing.
how somebody who went all the way through the process and they were going to offer a store to and didn't for one thing. Had nothing to do with religion. He didn't wash his hands in the bathroom. He went to the bathroom at corporate headquarters, and somebody else in there was pretty high up, and you don't know who's in there. Once I said, everything is being looked at, and he did not wash his hands.
I know what you're gonna say.
And he went back in there, and that guy followed him and said, he's a candidate, and they said, yeah, we're going to offer him a store. He said, well, before you do that, I just want to let you know, his sanitary wasn't the cleanest. And he told them, and they did not offer him a store. He got sent away.
I was laughing because I could imagine the guy coming out the bathroom and do not shake that guy's hand.
He probably was like that. I mean, knowing that you're getting ready to get involved with food that you have to serve people, right? People don't realize that we have to take multiple tests every few years. We have to pass those tests to get a license. And you have to do it through the state as well as Chick-fil-A. Like, so I think for most food businesses, you have to take the test every 5 years. So even like people at McDonald's and other places, you do have to take a food service test. Okay. It's called a serve safe test. So yes, we have to learn about the different bacterias like salmonella, because that's the main one with chicken, but with beef, it could be E. coli. Same thing could be with lettuces and produce. You have to be aware of these things to how best protect yourself.
I think what's crazy is, so you obviously have to wear gloves with dealing with food.
Yes.
But I think technically it's actually cleaner to do it with just previously washed hands than gloves.
So that is a misconception. Yeah. So the
Wrong.
the processes that we have in place is the cleanest that we're able to do. So
'Cause I've heard people go back and forth.
it is. So the health department knows that the best method to get the cleanest food is for you to wash your hands under hot water with soap for so many seconds, right? Because you're killing bacteria and stuff off your hands to food with that product. Gloves are actually cleaner when you put them on, yes, but we have what you call cross-contamination. So what happens is when you touch something, you can't feel it because you have a barrier between you and your feelings on your tip of your fingers. So what happens is you'll touch one thing and touch something else and then go back to touch that, and that's cross-contamination. So the process to correct that, and that's why most Chick-fil-A's, we actually have colored gloves. So if you're touching raw chicken, that is a yellow glove. If you're touching a finished product, that is a white glove. We try to stop the cross-contamination. And every time you touch a product, if you're going to do another task, you have to remove your gloves and go back to the washing of the hands before you put on new gloves. But yes, it all depends on the processes you may have in your store and how clean you keep the processes. They're there to be safe, but if someone in a business has a glove and they sweat in that glove and then they get a cut in their glove, it's worse than if someone just used their hand instead of washing their hand. So that all depends on the store, and it all depends on the employees that you have.
Yeah, well, I think it all boils down to being detail oriented. Just
is.
how in the beginning, faithful in the little, faithful in a lot. Like you said, it all comes full circle.
Yeah, it sounds like everything you've done has prepared you to be so detail oriented.
It is, and it teaches the kids also that the little things are important, and there are reasons why there are. Okay? No one wants to go explain to them that a child died because they got salmonella because you didn't wash your hands.
Yeah.
No, I do. I think I remember a story of you telling me that a guy who did get a Chick-fil-A was previously the captain of a naval ship.
There's different people from different backgrounds, like we said. He was actually he was on a naval ship, and he had so many people. He had some adjustments on a learning curve. I believe we talked about that in the past because he was so strict with the crew that he had now. I call them crew, but team members, because he quickly realized, and he's still with Chick-fil-A. He's a good guy. But there was a learning curve for him that, if you don't do what I say in the military, you're going in the brig. If you don't do what I tell you at Chick-fil-A, well, I'll
Getting
just
locked
quit.
in the freezer.
Yeah. So you don't have the same level of understanding. And that was an adjustment for some people coming from other job tasks that they had major responsibilities and want to be part of Chick-fil-A, that there is a learning curve there. It doesn't all translate over.
Well, the reason I was saying that is because, like, one, there was misconception of, different faiths in Chick-fil-A and the association of those two. But many people see Chick-fil-A's business model, and they say, man, I would love to own a Chick-fil-A. What do I need to do to own a Chick-fil-A? And they don't understand the process, or, maybe some people think I have to go specifically through this one route to do it.
Yeah.
But
Well, they should now. We just gave them the exclusive,
Well, there's two things. So right now, the numbers do change. What I love about what I do is almost half of the owners come from behind the counter. So I've actually had a number of people work for me who are now owners.
I'd like to say your store is one of the top stores.
There's
correct?
a few. There's a few owners in Louisiana who, at least in my market, I want to say there's 3 to 4 other owners that I know who love to pour into their team, and they're great coaches, they're great mentors, and all the other owners are good. Don't get me wrong, but these people, they enjoy developing someone who wants to be a business owner. So yeah, I mean, I have a few that I've gotten the pleasure of mentoring, and also sending to another store to get mentored.
Well, I think-
and becoming an owner.
I think what he was asking is, like, of the top Louisiana stores, where does yours rank at?
Oh, as far as like sales,
Yeah, like
Well,
top
I mean-
five,
Or
top
how
10.
how are y'all doing in all aspects, really?
So, like in my market, I'd say you're probably in the top 5. It just depends. It changes because
Yeah, year to
one
year.
store may be beating me in sales, right? But then they open a second location.
And it's
So that's
also-
going to pull sales away, and then it may make me go up. But if they open a second location where I'm at, my sales are going to be divided. So
Well,
that's kind of like
it's a
it's
difficult-
ebb and flow. It's ebb and flow.
No, it's not. I realize there's more that goes into it. Like, your sales might be here, but your cost might be here as well. So if you keep your costs down, your sales are here, you're more profitable.
Well, so if you're more profitable, yeah, everybody's different in their profit levels.
It's a difficult question to answer, because how do you answer, how good or how great I'm doing and still sound humble?
Yeah.
But the thing is healthy pride. So the pride in your family or country or business, healthy pride is tied to truth, and truth devoid of merit is arrogance. So you can look at numbers and how your store's doing and producing other Chick-fil-A owners, and you could say that is successful. And I guess that's kind of alluding to the point of how is your Chick-fil-A in I guess the southeast area.
So what we've had to learn is we can easily look at other sales and profits and say, what are you doing? You're doing great in this area. I want to do better in this area. And we do that a lot of times. But over the years, we realize that's not the best way to look at your business. A lot of times it's best to look at is, what am I doing against myself? So I might take other people and what they're doing, even all over the country, not even New Orleans, and say, this dude's killing it in this area. I want to get better in this area for me. So I might go actually take a trip with a few of my leaders. Like we just went to Miami a few weeks ago to visit an operator who I've done some missionary work with. Actually, we did a Ukraine trip together, I think back in 2016 or 17.
Do you pay for those leaders to go? Or
I do. So we make them put some skin in the game. Chick-fil-A also pays. So they love when we're involved with stuff like this. So if I was going to do a missionary trip to the one I did this year was actually in Romania. Okay, and I got to take 2 leaders.
And what is the mission of that trip?
Well, it depends. There's different things all over the world. You have to abide by those countries' rules. So, like in Ukraine at the time, proselytization is not really considered legal. So I can't just go in and start spreading the gospel per se. But
That's the first time I've ever heard the word proselytization. That's
Yes.
you learn something
Proselytize.
every day. That's crazy.
So you go over there and do that, you can get in trouble. So before you go over there, they tell you the country and they tell you the risk. And they tell you this is what you're going to do. So in Ukraine's case, it was a youth camp. And you had to learn how to speak English. But it's only illegal for Ukrainians to do what we're talking about as far as proselytizing. You get in trouble for it. But a foreigner can. So now if you were in Saudi Arabia, it's illegal for a foreigner to do it. You can actually go to jail. Okay? So you got to know what country you're in first and understand the laws of that country. And naturally, you're there to represent Chick-fil-A as well. So you want to make sure that you understand where you're going and what can you do.
And that's what I was going to ask, if there was guidelines that Chick-fil-A gives you.
There are, because it's an organization, Life Shape is the organization that's international, and they'll tell you where you're going, the risks. Some places are going to be more closer to the jungle, where you might actually have to get different inoculations to go. For malaria, you might need to take a certain amount of medication for malaria, and because you're going to a high-risk malaria area. Or you're going to, maybe it could be a city, like Ukraine was a big city, and they tell you where you're going. So we went to teach English. And some kids may have had a religious background, some don't. And you can incorporate some of that into the teachings that you're doing, and you get to mentor these kids, teach them about business and teach them a little English, and they have to do a project for their parents. Other things that you might go, like Haiti has a lot of water missions. You go dig a water well to make sure they get water, and you get to minister with the people of Haiti. So you can actually pick different ones they have, whatever suits you best.
Well, we're starting to, we're actually not starting to get really long time, or
Okay.
are long on time.
Okay.
But some stories and conversations do need the time to be able to tell them, and to be able to have, hindsight 2020, and to be able to see things for what they are. Like you were starting out, really not making much money, and the steps of now having a wife and a job and a commitment and a loyalty to a company for like Procter and Gamble, a good company, for 17 years.
So
To then have the challenge of deciding, do I make this jump to Chick-fil-A? Do I do these things? I'm going through problems, mentally, with dealing with the loss of a loved one, and then to where you're at now.
let me say this too. Even when I got switched over to Chick-fil-A, I tell you how hard I had to work and the loss of my dad and that. Even when I went over to Esplanade, Esplanade was a dying mall, and you still have to cover your expenses. There are times that you might put in 80 hours a week trying to make this business work, and at the end of the month, there's nothing left because everybody else gets paid. My employees gets paid before I get paid. The bread guy gets paid before I get paid. Chick-fil-A, they get their percentages, and what's left is the profit portion of it. And there's times that I literally broke even. My managers made more than I made. And you know what? It wasn't what I wanted, but it taught me how to dig in even deeper. It taught me how to work even harder. And yes, and even I'll tell you this quick story too. One of corporate people came down, and we'll walk in the mall, and we usually talk about different promotions and what we're trying to do and to build the brand. And he said, Nick, we do need to talk to you about something, because by this time my wife wasn't teaching anymore. She actually came on with Chick-fil-A, and she was my marketing person. And it was at Esplanade where we're breaking even. And because not all stores make a lot of money. I mean, you go into a low volume mall, and you might make minimum wage, to be honest with you, until you work your way into something better. But at this time, a lot of employees are making more than my wife. She was making about what they were making, but other marketing directors were making a lot more than she was making. But we just couldn't afford to pay her anymore. Even though Chick-fil-A is my partner, technically I can get them to cover some of that bill, but it just wasn't right. Morally, it wasn't right. And he sat with me and he said, Nick, I got to talk to you about your marketing director. And I said, well, what about it? He said, usually I have the opposite conversation. He said, you're not paying your wife enough. And I said, well, I can't afford to pay her anymore. They said, yeah, but you'd at least make sure she gets paid what other directors are being paid to do what she does as your marketing director. I said, well, I know Truett's my partner. And I said, at the end of the day, I appreciate you guys looking out for my back. But we broke even last month. If I pay her any more money, we'll go negative. And if I truly owned this business, or my business, I would fail, would I not? And he said, yes. I said, when I get another opportunity, okay, I promise my wife will get a raise. And he literally reached across the table, shook my hand, and said, that's why we love being in business with you. Because it's about morality. It's about just doing the right thing. It wasn't about the money. They understood that. And the one thing he told me that blessed me considerably, when they rebuilt Oakwood, to go back to Oakwood, we had a meeting, and we were with a bunch of the owners too. And he said, Nick, your store's going to be opening in a few months. I said, yes, sir, it is. He said, I hope you write the fattest checks you've ever seen. Now that said a lot to me. All the hard work I've been putting in, everything I've been doing, for a corporate person to recognize they want to see me be blessed, that says a lot. That makes me want to work my fingers to the bone even more. Now, yes, God has lightened my load over the years. I've figured out the business to the best of my ability. I'm in a much better position. But I did want to say this too, to bring everything full circle, because I know we're going late. When I was we're talking about how to have service at home office. They call it devotion, and it's optional. You go if you want to go. A guy who was a guest speaker there one time, he was from South Africa. So I went and talked to him afterwards, and I was only with Chick-fil-A maybe a year. And I was just happened to be at home office that day, and I went to the devotion. And he said, yeah, from South Africa. I said, you know Mark Breadcamp? He said, yes, I know Mark. And we started talking. It was crazy how this man prophesied over me, and yet this man is at home office. It's a different guy from South Africa, but it's all being linked a certain kind of way. And it's just the way God is and what he does. And I'll leave you with this. When I left Procter & Gamble, we used to go to lunch. And I'm telling all my friends, we talked earlier, like, hey, I may be leaving. I don't know if I will be leaving. I'm not sure. But we would go get Chinese food, and everybody wants to open their fortune cookie, and they want to read it. And they always ask, what you got, what you got, what you got? And I said, oh, man, you're going to believe what I got. He said, what you got? I said, it says that I'm going to be leaving my job to start a new endeavor.
That's awesome.
And they were like, oh, man, that's just crazy. Well, you ain't heard the best part yet. We laugh about it. We go back. A week later, we go to lunch. We go to a completely different Asian restaurant. Not even the same one. We get our food. And you're talking 6, 7 people. You got the fortune cookies. I open my fortune cookie. I got the exact same fortune cookie. So I'll be leaving my job soon to start new endeavors. And when I showed them, they're like, all right, you're not eating with us no more. You're freaking us out, because I preach to them all the time about different things. And I always say everything is a sign from God. I said, what are the chances of being with 6 people and getting the same exact fortune cookie in 2 different Asian restaurants? And any one of us could have picked up any one of those cookies. And 2 weeks later, that's when we got the call. And I put a 2-week notice in. And this is the last thing I'll leave you with. I walked out of Procter & Gamble. My last day at Procter & Gamble was to the day I got hired 17 years early. I walked out on the same day I walked in that I got hired.
I wanted to ask you that, so I'm glad you brought that up. What was that like, getting that call and then walking in knowing you're putting your 2 weeks in? Whether you like the job or not, it's just, that had to be such a good feeling, being like, I'm out.
And you worked for over a year to be able to get to Chick-fil-A.
It was. So it felt like a sense of accomplishment.
Just a breath of fresh air.
But scary.
Yeah.
I'm leaving something for 17 years, but I really got to try and make this work. I really got to work hard at this. It's what I wanted. God opened the doors for me. It's not easy to go where I'm going. I'm one of the fortunate ones. And walking out of there, it felt funny, because they walking me out and everybody's telling me bye. And even my last day there, okay? My last day, people are like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, well, it's my last day, so make sure everybody bye. Goes, man, I'd clock out. What are you going to do, fire you? They're like, I'd leave. And I'm like, I'm not. In fact, my response to them was, I want Procter & Gamble to know that my last day there was better than my first day there.
Nice.
And usually when you work your first day in a job, it's your best day. You want to show them how good you are. And I said, I want them to know that my last day was better than my first day.
I know a lot of people that do not have that attitude. That's nice to hear.
And that goes back to what we started, how we said God judges the heart. I think he just knows your heart, and I truly meant it.
So I guess to kind of, I know you said last thing, maybe once or twice, but for people listening to this, and I always think of the viewer listening to it, whether they're watching it or listening to it on any platform. I want people to, one, they're going to be curious of, how do I get into a Chick-fil-A? What is this Chick-fil-A guy's story? You know, no one knows who Nicky Perniciaro is. But when people watch this,
I do.
Yeah. But when people watch this, what would you say to them? So even if it's not Chick-fil-A and they're in their own endeavors, whatever that may be, what advice would you give them?
So first and foremost, if Chick-fil-A is for them, they need to ask the why. Why Chick-fil-A? If it's because it's a popular brand,
or in any endeavor is what I'm.
Well, that's what I'm gonna say. So if it's Chick-fil-A because that's what's popular and they're gonna make a lot of money, I would probably say you're probably not looking at it from the right angle. If your motive is more, whether it's that brand or any brand, to own your own business, make sure your motive is correct, because God will bless it. If you want to be a good boss, to provide jobs for people, that whatever your passion is, pursue your passions, but make sure you go into it eyes wide open in the things that you're going to do. Make sure that, even the Bible says no one builds a house without counting the cost. Make sure you have a good foundation. Make sure you know what it's going to cost. There's a lot of franchises out there. Be careful, because I'm not here to bash on the franchises, but they all are not Chick-fil-A in the fact that they're going to offer you what this company's offered me through the years, to be honest with you. They're more worried about their brand and who they are. It's not run off of biblical principles. That's why they operate the way they operate. But there's some good ones out there. There's some decent franchises out there that have good models that you have to see if that's what you want to be part of.
I think the one thing you said out of that, for any of the viewers watching was, before you start any endeavor, is count the cost. And that's not, just financially, but what you're going to have to sacrifice to pursue that endeavor that you're trying to attain. What is it going to cost you and your family? What is it going to cost you with your time? What is it going to cost you with your finances? What is it going to cost you emotionally? What is it going to cost you physically?
Well, you have to also understand that you have to build something. Too many people today, in my opinion, want something built for them. I had a friend of mine who, he worked with me at Procter & Gamble, and he quit after I quit because he wanted to start his own business. And I'm not going to say which business it was, but I told him don't. My advice to him was don't quit. It's a good job, because I knew what type of person he was also. And he wasn't a bad guy. I was friends with him. But at the same time, to be honest, it goes back to what we're talking about. We have, you may not like what I have to say, but I'm going to be honest and say it out of love, because I love you and I want to see you do better. I told him, for your family's sake, you need to stay where you're at. Well, he did quit. He did buy some equipment to do a business, and yeah, he lost money in it. And basically, at the end of the day, a lot of it was because, you get to a point where you think you're your own boss, but you don't work anymore. And the business falls apart. And that's not what it's really about. You can get to a point where you can pull out, get involved, but even at the highest levels of Chick-fil-A, they're all involved with their business.
Well, from your story, you left and you actually worked more to make probably the same or less.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was about to say. Is the one thing I'm kind of taking from hearing your testimony today is that you were not an overnight success with any endeavor you did.
No.
You stuck to your morals you learned from a young age, and you just did what you had to do and were trying to be the best you could no matter what position you were in, and did it. And leaving Procter & Gamble was exciting. It was terrifying. And you didn't just come into a Chick-fil-A and just succeed. You got hit with Katrina 3 months into it.
Yeah.
But you stuck to your morals and kept grinding and kept doing what you had to do, and were doing your best, and you got recognized for that, and you're here where you are today.
Yeah, and I'll tell a lot of people, I had a discussion with friends before. We talked about my journey and how they were proud of me. People who don't maybe have the faith I have, and they would say, we know that's all because of you. And I'd say, no, it's because of God. And we go back and forth, good friends, and love them to this day. But I had to come to the realization after discussing with him, he's like, you did all it because of your hard work. I'm like, yes, technically, was it my work? It was my work. But from my point of view, God blessed the hands of my work. And it's because I put the time. It's because I said yes. And I didn't say no. That God blessed the hands of my work. And he blessed the fact that I said, yeah, use me, Lord. That's what was blessed. The fact that when we say God blesses us, yeah, but you have something to put, you have to kind of put skin in the game. If God's going to bless you, then yes, you still have to put skin in the game.
Well, thank you for coming on the podcast. It's never really easy to end a podcast, especially when you're on time limit, but I'll have to see what happens once I go back into editing this one.
No worries, it's a pleasure, Joe.
You don't got to get home, but you got to get out it.
It was a pleasure, though.
But yeah, I think your story's a good one, and that a lot of people will benefit from it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate the time.